Hi everyone, it's John. I think at the end of my last tag video, I mentioned the fact that I was staring out of the side of my eye at a rather large pile of books that I recently came across, and there's a bit of a story behind them. I think if you watch Peg's channel, Peg over at the History Shelf has already hinted. She's been very well behaved as far as how she hinted at this, but I'll try and be more honest about how we behaved. Well, I won't implicate her in any of this. I'll just say how I behaved. So I think this was sometime maybe towards the end of October, the beginning of November. I noticed that the Liberty Fund, which is a site that I've talked about repeatedly on the channel, had revamped its site. And you had to re-register your account and your email address if you wanted to buy any books. So, of course, I re-registered and was planning on getting a few things. And I forgot who started it. If it was Peg or me. But one of us found out that Liberty Fund always has at least 2 or 3 floating coupon codes around. Usually for somewhere between 20 and 40% off. So I had one for 30, and I thought I would buy a few things, right? Just, the holidays were coming up, and I figured there's 50 more books in their catalog that I want, and I would just make a little bit of a dent in those. One of us found out that when you had already added a coupon code, that it would let you add another coupon code. So I had already had a 30% one on, and I added another 30% one on, and it took 60% off of my total. And I thought, oh my, I'm gonna place this order before anyone discovers this. And I did. I think I ordered 10 or maybe 15 books and hit order before anyone discovered it. The order went through, got a confirmation email. I went back later, maybe an hour later, and happened across another discount code, and just out of curiosity added it to my account for 20%. And lo and behold, it took 2. It took as well. And I was being given 80% off everything in my cart because I had 2 30% discounts, and a 20. Which means their $12 to $13 books were now in the $2.50 range. And I thought, okay, well, I might be horribly greedy and ill-behaved, but I'm going to take advantage of this. And I did. And take advantage is probably not the right word. I absolutely went insane. And I think I ended up buying something like 40 to 45 books. I won't tell you how much I spent, but it's probably not as much as you would think, considering they're all brand new. They're all, if anyone really wants to know, I guess I can say, but that's not really important. The fact is that they were drastically reduced in price. And there were so many books that I wanted. I basically got everything from their entire catalog that was on my wish list. I just went down and added them all to my cart and pressed purchase, and was really expecting for a few days to receive an email saying, how dare you try to take advantage of us like this? But it never came. And a couple of weeks later, I signed up for our text notice when it got delivered, and these books came in 4 boxes that totaled around 75 pounds. So here's about half of what I got that day. I'm going to show you the books one by one, and also there's quite a few of them. I couldn't really give you a cogent description of them, or certainly not a review. Needless to say, as I read them, I will post full-length reviews for you, like I do with everything that I read here. But I do want to say a little bit about each book, and to that end, what I'll do is I'll read you the blurb on libertyfund.org that's associated with each book as I go through them. In advance, I want to let you know that I have not taken the cellophane wrapping off any of the books. So, just for example, this is the first one I'm going to show you. You can clearly see the cellophane there. If there's any glare, I'm sorry. If you can't see the title or if it's unclear, let me know. I'd be glad to repeat anything. I know the glare is somewhat annoying. But the first book I wanted to show you was this one. It is called Constitutionalism and the Separation of Powers, and it's by M.J.C. Weil. The little blurb on the site says, in this book, M.J.C. Weil traces the history of the doctrine from its rise during the English Civil War, through its development in the 18th century, through subsequent political thought and constitution making in Britain, France, and the United States. Some of the blurbs are longer than others. That's a particularly short one. So, I love constitutional history, and not just American constitutional history. I mean constitutions going as far back as, the Magna Carta, and what we sometimes call the constitutions of, ancient Greece. The next book is a collection of lectures by, for some reason they don't call him Lord Acton here, but they do on other Liberty Fund publications. This is Lectures in the French Revolution by, oh goodness, I can't see it, John Emmerich Edward Dahlberg Acton, who is Lord Acton, the Lord Acton. This collection of lectures of Lord Acton on the French Revolution comprises a disciplined, thorough, and elegant history of the actual events of the bloody episode. It is as thorough a record as could be constructed in Acton's time of the actions of the government of France during the Revolution. That's probably not true, because Madame de Stael wrote an 800-page book on kind of the same subject. But whether it's the most comprehensive book or not, it is still Lord Acton's view, which I'm interested in as a very important 19th century diplomatic figure. Let's see. Oh, this has a little coupon on it. Okay, I didn't even notice that. When you're unpacking 45 books at a time, you just sort of overlook things like this. Next up is the history of the origins of representative government in Europe by Francois Guizot. And you can see the last name there. It's Guizot. The French political philosopher and historian Francois Guizot, whose dates are 1787 to 1874, was one of the French doctrinaires, thinkers who sought to avoid the interpretations of the Revolution advanced by either the extreme left or the extreme right. He argued that in order to understand the nature of political institutions, it's necessary to study first the society, its compositions, mores, and relation between various classes. At the very center of his theory lies the principle of the sovereignty of reason. So I know of Guizot as a very important 19th century French historian. I've never read anything by him. There is another book in this video by him, but this is the history of the origins of representative government in Europe. Next up is a book by someone you may have heard of if you're interested in conservative thought, conservative political philosophy from the United States. The author is Russell Kirk, and it is John Randolph of Roanoke, a study in American politics. And the blurb on the site says, John Randolph of Roanoke is unique in American political history. For most of his public career, Randolph was a leader of the opposition to both Jeffersonians and Federalists. Only 26 when first elected to Congress in 1799, he readily became the most forceful figure at the Capitol. So this is, I guess, sort of an intellectual biography, at least a biography of him in politics. And like I said, Russell Kirk might be a name you're familiar with. So next up is a book of political writing by Samuel Johnson. It's called Political Writings, edited by Donald J. Green. The 17th century produced a remarkable array of thinkers whose influence in the development of free societies and free institutions is incalculable. Among these thinkers were Mandeville, Hutcheson, Smith, Hume, and Burke. Their time is known as the Age of Johnson. Samuel Johnson, Political Writings, contains 24 of Johnson's essays on the great social, economic, and political issues of his time. These include Taxation, No Tyranny, in which Johnson defended the British Crown against American revolutionaries, and An Introduction to the Political State of Great Britain, Thoughts on the Coronation of King George III, and The Patriot, which is one of Johnson's principal writings during the American Revolution. So a bunch of essays and occasional pieces by, I almost said Ben Jonson, but it's Samuel. Next up is Fame and the Founding Fathers, essays by Douglas Adair. Douglas Adair was an American historian. This has 15 articles, essays, notes, documents, other literary ephemera gathered together that create a permanent contribution to the study of the American founding. As teacher, critic, and editor of the William and Mary Quarterly, Adair demonstrated what Trevor Colburn, one of his principal students, described as, quote, an extraordinary ability to enter empathetically into the experience and ideology of the Founding Fathers, while at the same time writing about them critically and movingly. This volume also includes an affectionate reminiscence of Adair by Carolyn Robbins and a bibliographical essay by Robert E. Stalhope. That's one of the other things I love about Liberty Fund is they have, the books that they have tend to have great critical notes and wonderful supplementary readings and stuff like that in case you really, really want to get deep into the weeds. Next. Books are kind of getting thicker as we go along. Okay. This is David Hume, a book of collected stuff, essays, moral, political, and literary. This edition contains 39 of Hume's essays that made up Volume 1 of his 1777 posthumous set of essays called Essays and Treatises on Several Subjects. Very uncontroversial, unsuggestive name. And it also includes 10 essays that were withdrawn or left unpublished by Hume for various reasons. Okay, I'm trying to see how high I can stack without that thing falling over. Okay, even bigger. This is a book by Baron de Montesquieu, translated, edited with an introduction by Henry C. Clarke. It's in French, Montesquieu, I think how you would say it. And this is the Baron de Montesquieu of the Spirit of the Laws fame. My Thoughts provides a unique window into the mind of one of the undisputed pioneers of modern thought and the author of the 1748 classic, The Spirit of the Laws. From the publication in 1721 of his first masterpiece, The Persian Letters, until his death in 1755, Montesquieu maintained notebooks in which he wrote and dictated ideas on a wide variety of topics. Some of the contents are early drafts of passages that Montesquieu eventually placed in his published works. Others are outlines or early versions of projected works that were ultimately lost, unfinished, or abandoned. Those notebooks provide important insights into his views on a broad range of topics, from morality to religion, history, law, economics, finance, science, art, and constitutional liberty. Montesquieu called these notebooks mes pensées, my thoughts, and they appear in their entirety in English for the first time in this Liberty Fund edition. Okay, we're making progress. This is a book by someone I've always wanted to read, and like I said, was on my buy list for the longest time. Read his wife, who is known as Lady Montague. She was very, very well known for the letters that she wrote while her husband was stationed in, was it Turkey? Constantinople or something? And she wrote a series of really lively, personal, interesting letters while they were living there. This isn't Lady Montague. This is Lord Montague, Edward Wortley Montague. Reflections on the Rise and Fall of Ancient Republics, adapted to the present state of Great Britain. Wow, that cellophane really is glary. In 1759, at the height of the 7 Years' War, when Great Britain was suffering a series of military reversals, Montague considered his country's plight in a historical context formed by the study of five ancient republics: Sparta, Athens, Thebes, Carthage, and Rome. Montague's focus on the ancient republics gives his contribution a distinctive twist to the chorus of voices lamenting Britain's decline, and his analysis exerted influence in three momentous 18th century crises: the 7 Years' War, the American War of Independence, and the French Revolution. This is the first modern edition of Montague's book. All right, next. They don't have in Liberty Fund a lot of books that are explicitly about religion or religious history. certainly not this period of religious history, so sort of made me scratch my head and made me very curious. I'd heard about the name, and I'd certainly heard Charles Norris Cochrane's name before, but as soon as I read the description, I knew it would be something I would probably love. This is Christianity and Classical Culture. Yikes. A study of thought and action from Augustus to Augustine by Charles Norris Cochrane. Christianity and Classical Culture is considered one of the great works of scholarship published in the last century. The theme of Christianity and Classical Culture is the fundamental change in thought and action that occurred from the reign of Augustus to the time of Augustine. The classical world sought to practice politics and understand the world purely in rational terms, but the difficulties of this program were already evident in as Christianity began developing a completely new understanding of the human world. It is from this revolution in ideas that our modern world was forged. W.H. Auden wrote of an earlier edition in the New Republic. Since the appearance of the first edition of this book in 1940, I have read it many times, and my conviction of its importance to the understanding not only of the epoch with which it is concerned, but also of our own, has increased with each rereading. So with an endorsement from W.H. Auden, that was only more of an impetus to add it to my cart. Next. Okay. The biggest single volume I think I have. This is On Religion. Get the full subtitle. Considered in its source, its forms, and its development, by Benjamin Constant. Looks like Benjamin Constant, but he was a French diplomat, so Benjamin Constant, I think is how you would pronounce his name, more or less. This is the first full-length English translation of Constant's massive study of humanity's religious forms and development, published in 5 volumes between 1824 and 1831. Constant lived from 1767 to 1830, and regarded On Religion, worked on over the course of many years as perhaps his most important philosophical work. He called it the only interest, the only consolation of my life, and, quote, the book that I was destined by nature to write. Never read anything. I'm familiar with the name, but had never read anything by Constant. So, was glad to get this. Also, one of the few I managed to get in a hardcover. Next, let's see. This is Envy, a theory of social behavior by Helmut Schuck. I had never heard of this book, and I had never heard of Helmut Schuck before. Again, this is kind of a sociology, what would you say? Social, like, I don't know, like psychology heavy sociology. I don't. There aren't a lot of books like this in Liberty Fund's catalog. They mostly focus on history, intellectual history, stuff like this. This seems like the study of a particular emotion or attitude, which is, like I said, not something that they have a lot of. But the description sold me. And here's the description. This classic study is one of the few books to explore extensively the many facets of envy, quote, a drive which lies at the core of man's life as a social being. Ranging widely over literature, philosophy, psychology, and the social sciences, Professor Schuck, a distinguished sociologist and anthropologist, elucidates both the constructive and destructive consequences of envy in social life. Perhaps most important, he demonstrates that not only the impetus toward a totalitarian regime, but also the egalitarian impulse in democratic societies are alike in being rooted in envy. Be interesting to see how that's supported. Next, this kind of has a bit of a suspicious title, but I just trusted Liberty Fund with this one. I'm inherently dubious of ideas that connect civilization with progress, but this is called The Evolution of Civilizations by Carroll Quigley, an introduction to historical analysis. Carroll Quigley was a legendary teacher at the Georgetown School of Foreign Service. His course on the history of civilizations was extraordinary in its scope and its impact on students. Like the course, The Evolution of Civilizations is a comprehensive and perceptive look at the factors behind the rise and fall of civilizations. Quigley examines the application of scientific method to the social sciences and then establishes his historical hypotheses. He poses a division of culture into 6 levels from the abstract to the more concrete. He then tests those hypotheses by a detailed analysis of 5 major civilizations: the Mesopotamian, the Canaanite, Minoan, the Classical, and the Western. Quigley defines a civilization as, quote, a producing society within an instrument of expansion, end quote. A civilization's decline is not inevitable, but occurs when its instrument of expansion is transformed into an institution. That is, when social arrangements that meet real social needs are transformed into social institutions serving their own purposes regardless of real social needs. Sounds like it might need a book to explain it. So, I found the book. Next, I said I had 2 books by François Guizot. This is the other one. Love the red, the maroon. This is the history of civilization in Europe. I don't know how we're going to cover all the civilization in Europe in 250 pages, but if it's by François Guizot, I'll give it a try. This is originally a series of lecture that he gave at the Sorbonne. François Guizot's History of Civilization in Europe was published to great acclaim in 1828 and is now regarded as a classic in modern historical research. It particularly influenced the work of Karl Marx, John Stuart Mill, and Alexis de Tocqueville. De Tocqueville, in fact, requested a copy of this book to be sent to him when he arrived in the United States. This volume offers what Guizot himself describes as a philosophic history of Europe, one which searches for the underlying general causes and effects of particular events. Guizot considers European history in its broadest senses, encompassing not merely political, economic, and social structures, but also the ideas, faculties, and sentiments of, quote-unquote, man himself. Guizot understood a 2-way relationship between external conditions, like social, political, and economic conditions, and the inner man. External conditions affect the inner man, whose moral and intellectual development eventually shapes social and other external conditions. Guizot's history describes the development of European civilization in terms of the inevitable advance of equality of conditions due to many factors, including a new emphasis on the individual. The author explores the decentralization of power that characterized feudalism, the centralization of power after the 15th century, and finally the rebuilding of local autonomy necessary for a representative and free government. As editor Larry Seidentop describes, the history is moral is about the social and political consequences of destroying local liberty. Excessive concentration of power at the center of any society is, in the long run, its own undoing, quote unquote. Next up, a couple of books, collected works of Adam Smith, but none of his economics. So if you're expecting to see The Wealth of Nations, sorry. This is one of the several books that they have that's not on Adam Smith's economics, actually. This is Lectures on Rhetoric and the Belles Lettres by Adam Smith. The notes of Dr. Smith's Rhetoric lectures, discovered in 1958 by a University of Aberdeen professor, consists of lecture notes taken by two of Smith's students at the University of Glasgow from the year 1762 to 1763. There are 30 lectures in this collection, all on rhetoric and the different kinds of characteristics of style. The book is divided into, quote, an examination of the several ways of communicating our thoughts by speech, and, quote, an attention to the principles of those literary compositions which contribute to persuasion or entertainment, end quote. The species of communication discussed include descriptive and narrative or historical composition, poetry, demonstrative oratory, panegyric, didactic or scientific language, deliberative oratory, and judicial or forensic oratory. The subjects addressed in his teachings include the style and genius of some of the best of the ancient writers and poets, especially the historians and the English classics. And the other book by Adam Smith, the one I might even be better in some ways, or the bits I've read of it, than, or at least more influential than The Wealth of Nations, possibly, is, but no one ever really seems to read it, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. Still extensively read by moral philosophers and moral thinkers, but not usually assigned in many syllabi. The Theory of Moral Sentiments was Adam Smith's first and this says most important work. Guess that's up for dispute. Outlines his view of proper conduct and the institutions and sentiments that make men virtuous. Here he develops his doctrine of the impartial spectator, whose hypothetical disinterested judgment we must use to distinguish right from wrong in any given situation. We by nature pursue our self-interest, according to Smith. This makes independence or self-command an instinctive good, and neutral rules as difficult to craft as they are necessary. But society is not held together merely by neutral rules. It's held together by sympathy. Smith argues that we naturally share the emotions and to a certain extent the physical sensations we witness in others. Sharing the sensations of our fellows, we seek to maximize their pleasures and minimize their pains so that we may share in their joys and enjoy their expressions of affection and approval. And the last book I have to show you is actually not one book. It is what I can only assume is an original piece of work by the Liberty Fund, edited by two people named Philip B. Kurland and Ralph Lerner. It is 5 volumes. I will do my best to hold them up. Well, okay, I'll hold up one for you. This is volume 5, and these are gigantic I mean, compare this to a regular size book. Okay. This is almost like a coffee table size book. This is the Founders Constitution, Volume 5. And this one happens to have amendments 1 through 12. And it's discussions of those amendments. This is, according to the site, a triumph of primary source research. The Founders Constitution is a brilliant 5-volume series that presents extracts from all the leading works of political theory, history, law, and constitutional government on which the framers and their contemporaries drew and which they themselves produced. The documentary sources and inspirations of the Founders Constitution reach to the early 17th century and extend through those amendments to the Constitution that were adopted by the year 1835. So here's like I said, volume 5, which takes us up through Amendment 12, in fact, which has all the amendments in it. I'll go through in reverse order. Let me start with 1. That probably makes the most sense. They're so gigantic. By the way, all these 5 volumes together, over 3,300 pages. So this is not something, needless to say, you would ever sit down and read cover to cover, but it's more like a research resource. If you ever find yourself writing about early American political history or its influences, constitutional history, anything like that, this would probably be a treasure trove. That's exactly what I got it for. Here's volume 1, called Major Themes. And there you go. Here's volume 2. This takes us through, from the preamble through Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 of the Constitution. Volume 3 takes us from Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 through Article 2, Section 1. There you go. And Volume 4 takes you through Article 2, Section 2 through Article 7. And I showed you 5. So let me try to hold up all of these and show you what they would look like on a bookshelf. Okay, let's see if I can do this. These have to weigh 30 pounds. May not be able to do it, but you can just kind of, I'll leave them on the table like that, but you can see they're quite, take up quite a bit of a shelf. Like I said, over 3,300 pages of material when it's all said and done. So these are about half, maybe a little bit more than half of what I bought that fated day at Liberty Fund. When the prices were great. And by the way, this set that I just showed you, the 5-volume set, I think it cost maybe 14 or 15 bucks with the discount that I got. So, like I said, nice value. Was amazed when they were actually delivered at my door instead of a sternly worded email saying, "How dare you?" But I will be back with the second half, roughly the second half, probably sometime in the new year. First week, second week of January. Until then, I hope you enjoy the video and my new books, and I will see you later. Bye, everyone.